Dindimuzi Budi, did I pronounce it right, Honorable? Thank you. The Office of the President and Cabinet, facilitators of this summit, Morning Park, here led by Dr. Whisper Rukanda, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all.
Good morning, sir.
Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, thank you for setting the tone. It demonstrates how the combating of cyber fraud should be and has become a national agenda than just being a cause for a single sector of our economy. As I utter these words, a cyber criminal halfway or somewhere across the world, or right here in Zimbabwe, could be attempt to breach a bank's network. Such is the sobering reality of our digital age. Cybersecurity is no longer a distant or abstract threat. It is right at our doorstep, targeting our banks, our businesses, and any one individual in Zimbabwe and the world at large. As the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, we have witnessed firsthand how a single fraud incident can ripple through our financial system, eroding trust and costing millions. Today, I stand before you to address one of the defining security challenges of our time, which is effective collaboration between banks, regulators, and law enforcement to combat cyber fraud. This is a call to arms for all of us, in the banking halls, in the regulatory agencies, in the law enforcement bureaus, to unite in safeguarding the integrity of Zimbabwe's financial ecosystem. We now live in an era of unprecedented digital transformation. Zimbabwe's digital economy has expanded exponentially, with the internet, mobile technology reaching into nearly every corner of society. By way of statistics, broadband penetration in Zimbabwe has surged from a mere 0.4 in the year 2000 to almost 60% today, and mobile penetration now exceeds 100%. With this level of connectivity, while it brings immense opportunity for the economic growth and financial inclusion, it also widens the attack surface for cyber criminals. And make no mistake, those fraudsters are increasingly setting their sights on Zimbabwe. Maybe before I proceed any further, I'll set the Zimbabwean context. Zimbabwe has experienced notable cyber threats and attacks, particularly in the financial services sector. And this will be largely because of the use of the US dollar. It's an international currency, so obviously it attracts anyone else. Such incidents lay bare the urgent need for stronger defenses and transparency, as well as mandatory disclosures of cyber attacks to protect clients. Zimbabwe's cyber fraud challenge can be quantified. Back in 2018, over 4,000 cybercrime cases were handled by the Zimbabwe Republic Police, with an estimated USD 40 million lost to cyber fraud in that single year. From research, there has been an identified mismatch between the threats we face and the strength of our defenses. It stood at seemingly good 77%. But to put it plainly, cyber criminals have probably noticed our weaknesses and probably are trying to seize the opportunity. We cannot afford to be the low-hanging fruit, the easy $10 not protruding from the back of the pocket. We mustn't be seen as an easy mark. But the question is, why do these attackers target us? It is largely because we are connected. And perhaps because historically there's been a false sense of security, maybe a notion that we are too small or too poor to be of interest to hackers. That myth has since been dispelled. In some event, at some point, the Honorable Minister of ICT, Postal and Courier Services, Honorable Rinama Bechera, underscored that cybercrime is just not a technical issue, but a societal challenge requiring collective response. I couldn't agree more with that. What does that mean? It means our attitudes towards cybersecurity must change. We must recognize that every bank, every business, every individual, including all of us here, with a netted connection, has a role to play in strengthening our cyber resilience. The fight cannot be left to IT technicians alone. It demands leadership from the top and coordination across all sectors. Today, I will outline the challenges we're facing as Zimbabwe in relation to cyber fraud. I'll try and frame them in the broader regional and global context and identify the key roles that banks, regulators, law enforcement must play. Most importantly, I will highlight why collaboration, purposeful, robust collaboration, is our most powerful weapon against cyber fraud. I'll delve into what will be the challenges in terms of fraud, cyber fraud in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is embracing digital revolution with enthusiasm, but this very success has attracted cyber criminals. Our country has seen a rapid proliferation of digital financial services. Mobile money, online banking, electronic remittances are some of the platforms that are now part of everyday life. And COVID-19 is actually motivated for more adoption of these platforms. As we have opened up to new digital platforms, this has opened us up to new avenues for fraudsters to exploit. One major challenge we face is low cybersecurity awareness and preparedness. As we were briefing the Deputy Minister in the morning, we were just discussing how much the traditional cyber criminals are still being exploited. We still have people that are being falling prey to old traditional scams. That shows that the rate at which we are disseminating cybersecurity awareness is actually lower. More people are coming onto the platforms. But as we introduce innovation, like the minister alluded to, we need to ensure that the level of awareness also increases so that people don't fall prey to these cyber criminals. Some chilling statistics, this may be debatable, but Zimbabwe is ranking of 142 out of 182 countries on the ITU Union's Global Cybersecurity Index. Is a clear signal that we've got a lot of work cut out for ourselves. So we are 142 out of 182 on the Cybersecurity Index. Our Cybersecurity Index score stands at roughly 18%, reflecting gaps in technical capacity and strategic measures. This is not the league we want to, the league table we want to lead. It tells us that we probably, attackers find us relatively easier prey, perhaps due to somewhat insufficient deficiencies or a perception of law enforcement response. I'll just list some of the specific challenges contributing to our situation in Zimbabwe. Number one, limited cybersecurity infrastructure and skills. Number two, inadequate enforcement and legal frameworks. We have frameworks in place. I'll quote I think there's a lot of effort in the enactment of the Cybersecurity and Data Protection Act. And I know POTRAS, I was reminding the minister earlier on that we met recently at the POTRAS event, data privacy event, where POTRAS were actually outlining the roadmap for the implementation of the Cybersecurity and Data Protection Act. The act has been around for the past, I think, 4 years now, and we want to interrogate maybe this session to say, have we done enough? Are we moving at the right pace? The Honorable Minister alluded earlier on to the fact that innovation is happening at a fast pace. Our regulations and our actions following at the same pace. We also got an issue of public attitude and awareness, like I mentioned earlier on. We are not a small economy anymore. Hackers don't have a bigger fish to fry. We are the big fish because we are in a global world. Cybersecurity must become our second nature. And I don't think it is for the United Zimbabwe at the moment. Having outlined our domestic landscape, let me broaden the perspective. Zimbabwe's cyber fraud challenge doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of a regional and global web. I will maybe take you to some regional and global cyber fraud trends which signify why Zimbabwe must be ready. In 2023, Africa saw an average 23% year-on-year increase in weekly cyber attacks per organization. This is the highest surge in any region in the world. Thinking about it, this is nearly 1/4 more attacks each week, compounding relentlessly. And Zimbabwe is very much a part of that trend. Across Africa, cybercrime was estimated to cost African economies over 3.5 billion annually. And newer estimates are giving us a figure of around 4 billion each year. Unfortunately, research has it that over 90% of African businesses are operating without adequate cybersecurity protocols. Being Africa, we are focusing on the core business. But how are we putting adequate measures? Research says that we're not putting adequate measures, meaning that the vast majority of organizations and businesses are ill-prepared for these threats. This is a continental problem requiring a coordinated response. Cyber fraud is truly transnational, ladies and gentlemen. Criminals are operating across the continent. A hacker in Eastern Europe might launder money through Zimbabwean accounts, or a fraudster in Harare might trick victims in London or New York. However, regionally, there are positive steps underway. The SADC has recognized the need for a joint approach to cybersecurity. Our regional bodies and forums are increasingly discussing cybercrime operation. The African Union, through its Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, the Malabo Convention of 2014, has laid out a continental-wide legal framework to combat cybercrime and protect personal data. Not all nations, though, have fully ratified and implemented these conventions, and that includes Zimbabwe. And I think we should actually move to actually ratify these conventions and create a roadmap for awaiting for ratification. Yes. Ratified.
Last week.
Oh. Thank you. So I think our research was probably almost in line with this was done last week. So it shows that we need to collaborate more because if our government is actually ratifying things and we're not yet aware that that gap can actually be exploited by the fraudsters. I will just maybe share another global statistics that should actually maybe capture the agency which we need to tackle this issue of cyber fraud. Worldwide, cybercrime cost an estimated USD 1 trillion in 2020. This is more than 1% of the global gross domestic product. And the annual cost is projected to soar to 10.5 trillion. Maybe delegates, distinguished guests, let that sink in. These are trillions, not billions. If cybercrime was an economy, it would be among the world's largest. This explosion in cyber losses is fueled by increasingly sophisticated attacks like AI-enhanced phishing or state-sponsored hacking. I'm sure, I think in the past few weeks we had the reported hack of about 1.5 billion on a cryptocurrency institution that was purported to have been instituted through North Korea. So you can see some governments probably are now taking part in this as part of a warfare. I will go on to return to the core of our discussion. What must we, banks, regulators, law enforcement, do together to combat cyber fraud in Zimbabwe? It starts with understanding our distinct roles. I'll start with the role of banks. The banks are the frontline defenders. Why are they the frontline defenders? It is because they are the frontline targets of cyber frauds. And thus, they must be the frontline defenders. The banks hold the treasure that the cyber criminals seek, whether it's money in the deposit accounts, sensitive customer information, or access to payment systems. As such, banks have the responsibility to build strong walls and alarm systems. Banks must also invest in robust cybersecurity infrastructure and expertise. Banks must implement strong access controls and authentication for their services. Banks play a key role in fraud detection and response. This is quite a key aspect to say how quickly can you, sometimes you may not be able to practically deal with fraud, but how quickly can you detect attempts? And equally important, how quickly can you respond to actually minimize the impact of any breach? How banks detect and respond to an incident can make the difference between a contained event and a catastrophe. In this case, banks should have 24/7 monitoring, watching for anomalies, whether it's unusual login, suspicious fund transfers, malware signatures on the network. We should have a clear instant response plans in our financial institutions. We should know who to notify in the case of a breach. Do we notify internally? Do we notify our regulators? Do we notify the law enforcers? And time is of essence when a cyber incident occurs. The faster the breach or fraud is addressed, the less damage it causes. Additionally, and more importantly, banks have a responsibility to educate their customers and indeed educate the public. Many fraud schemes can be foiled if customers recognize and take precautions. Finally, banks should share information with each other and with authorities. I will discuss about this more when we talk about collaboration. I'll move on to talk about the role of regulators, including the Reserve Bank, the Securities Exchange, the insurance commissions, and other government agencies include our telecommunication regulators and other regulators. These serve as architects of the financial service sector cybersecurity framework. Our role as regulators is to create an environment where strong security is not optional or an afterthought, but rather an integral part of the financial system's DNA. How do we achieve this? I will summarize this. Firstly, through clear policies, guidelines, and enforcement. The Reserve Bank has the mandate to issue regulations that require banks to maintain robust cybersecurity standards. We do have in the House our Bank Supervision Deputy Director, whose role is to ensure that banks are implementing our regulations and are maintaining standards. As regulators, we we must ensure that our legal framework for cybercrime is up to date and aligned with the global norms. If our regulations are outdated, we will not be able to plug the gap. We also work with government and legislature to update our laws as needed. I think the Honorable Deputy Minister alluded to that in our briefing with the speakers. I think the Deputy Minister invited us to say, wherever we need X to be changed, we should quickly approach the government so that action can be taken. The Reserve Bank should act as a convener and facilitator of collaboration. We oversee the banking sector and have relationships with each institution's leadership. This places us in a unique position to bring banks together to share information, best practices in a non-competitive and safe setting. Additionally, as regulators, we can invest in sector-wide protected infrastructure. Here, we draw inspiration from a pioneering initiative by one of our African peers, the Bank of Ghana, who recently built a financial industry command security operations center called FISOC. This FISOC receives real-time alerts, logs from banks on systems, aggregates threat intelligence, and helps coordinating reports across the industry. It's as if all banks have put some of their radar systems into one big radar, and the central banks helps monitor. Finally, regulators must focus on building capacity and guidance. Why is this so? Not all banks have the same capacity. Thank you, Modipak, for the backup. It worked. That shows you're prepared for any eventualities. So I was talking about many banks or small financial institutions struggling to keep up with the rapidly changing cyber threat landscape. Regulators should come in to assist and give periodic guidance on emerging threats. In summary, the Reserve Bank and our other regulatory partners should set the tone from the top. We create rules of the game, enforce discipline, and we convene the team. I'll move on to the role of law enforcement, whose role is to pursue and deter cyber criminals. When cyber fraudsters eventually strike, it is always the job of the law enforcement to investigate the crime, apprehend the culprit, and help deliver justice. In the context of cyber fraud, our law enforcement agencies, from the ZRP to specialized units and our prosecution authorities, they face a complex crime, often involving technology, that involves constantly and frequently involving perpetrators outside our national borders. So, law enforcement must build specialized cybercrime investigation capabilities. I'm glad to note that the ZRP has established a cybercrime and cybersecurity unit dedicated to such cases. Law enforcement should ensure prompt and close collaboration between them, financial institutions, and other regulators. When a bank takes a fraud, say a hacking of accounts or fraudulent interbank transfers, they need to know exactly who to call as therapy. They need the confidence that the police will respond swiftly. On the other side, law enforcement should have protocols to quickly reach out to banks when they learn of such threats. Law enforcement must work beyond our borders. As I alluded earlier on, we don't live in a vacuum, and cyber fraud knows no boundaries. So our law enforcement agencies should actually be empowered to actually work and be interconnected with other law enforcement agencies, and I'm happy to report that the ZRP works has got ties with Interpol. Finally, we must ensure that those who are caught engaging in cyber fraud face the consequences. This means our justice system, prosecutors and courts should treat cyber crimes with the seriousness it deserves. Financial fraud is financial fraud, whether it was done through a gun or through the keyboard. The penalties should reflect the harm done. As the Reserve Bank, I think we'll continue to engage the judicial system to explore establishing special judicial training on cybercrime so that our prosecutors can effectively present digital evidence and our judges understand intricacies when are judging such cases. Having outlined these roles of the triad between regulators, banks, law enforcement, it is evident that none of these pillars can stand effectively in isolation. The magic lies in how we collaborate. I will now proceed to outline the importance of collaboration and coordination across all sectors. Why do we need unity in collaboration? There is power in collaboration. Unity is our strongest defense. Cyber fraud is a many-headed hydra of a problem. Try to combat it alone, you may cut off one hand, only to have two grow elsewhere. But combat it together with serious strategy, and we can overwhelm it. No single entity has complete view or complete control. A bank can see attacks on its networks, but might not know that other banks are experiencing the same attack. The regulator, on the other hand, can spot systemic patterns, like multiple banks reporting similar incidents, but only if banks have reported them. Law enforcement might also identify cybercrime ring, need information from banks to trace the money or technical details from telecom companies. Each party holds a piece of the puzzle. Key also is speed and coordination response. In the event of a fast-moving cyber fraud incident, as an example, a wave of ATM fraud is multiple banks over a weekend. A coordinated response is everything. If banks individually take measures but don't warn each other or involve authorities, the fraudsters will simply hop to the next unsuspecting target. But if through a hotline or information sharing platform, the first bank to spot the fraud alerts others immediately, all banks can simultaneously implement defensive measures. This is the kind of agility that collaboration enables. The other key imperative is shared resources and expertise. I alluded to that earlier on. Not every bank or institution has a large cybersecurity team or advanced forensic tools, especially our smaller institutions. Collaboration allows us to pool resources for the common good. The next imperative around collaboration is trust and communication. This perhaps is the most intangible yet vital aspect of collaboration, which is building trust. Traditionally, banks might have been hesitant to share information about incidents for fear of reputational damage or consequences from the regulator. Law enforcement might be aware of tipping off banks during investigations, and regulators might find out things only much later. We must break down these walls with mutual trust and clear protocols. In summary, when banks, regulators, law enforcement operate in isolation, cyber fraudsters rejoice. They exploit the weakest links and the communication gaps. But when we operate as a cohesive unit, sharing information and aligning strategies, we turn the tables on the fraudsters. We make Zimbabwe a hostile environment for cybercrime. Our collective strength will always outmatch any individual's actor strength. I will possibly leave this gathering with some recommendations and way forward, which seek to strengthen our collective response. Ladies and gentlemen, combating cyber fraud requires more than awareness. It requires action. Here I outline a set of concrete recommendations to enhance our collaborative fight against crime. The actions mainly alluded to will solidify our defenses and align Zimbabwe with regional and global best practices. I present them in 5 key areas. 1, policy and regulatory enhancements. 2, information sharing mechanisms. 3, capacity building and training. 4, technology adoption and innovation. 5, public awareness and education. Each is crucial in its own, but together they form a comprehensive approach. One key aspect that I'll mention in detail is what we probably call a national computer emergency response team. This team will not only coordinate responses, but also develop or deploy useful technologies for the country. The CERT, also what some would call SET, can set up early warning systems and sensors on government and bank networks that can detect malware, feed information back to our database. They can also maintain the report of best practice configurations for common software used in banks and other institutions. The other key thing is to encourage innovation with security in mind. As we push for digital financial inclusion and fintech innovation in Zimbabwe, we will seamlessly push for security by design. The RBZ's fintech initiatives and sandbox programs will include cybersecurity assessments. They already do include that. I will possibly part with our commitment as the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe is fully committed to driving and coordinating the efforts. We will dedicate necessary resources and attention. This is now a standing item in our strategic objectives. But the success will depend on active participation and commitment of all stakeholders. Every bank CEO who decides to invest in more in cybersecurity and encourages openness in sharing threats. Every regulator who treats cybersecurity risk with the gravity of a major financial risk. Every police officer who treats a report online or a report of online fraud with the same agency as a bank. And indeed, every customer who takes cyber hygiene seriously. This is collective responsibility. In driving these actions, we'll continue to benchmark against our global best practices. We will not operate in isolation. We are already engaging with African central banks and institutions. Those that may not be in the know, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe is part of a regional body called Conference of Central Bank Governors, who meet regularly to share notes on various aspects that ensures we engender the mandate of price and financial stability, and cybersecurity is actually a core subcommittee in this conference. I conclude with a call to action. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, I urge you to reflect on a simple truth. In the fight against cyber fraud, we rise or fall together. Our financial system security is only as strong as its weakest link. A vulnerability in one bank can threaten customers in another. A gap in one agency response can embolden criminals to exploit the whole country. Conversely, a breakthrough by one team can benefit all, and a defense erected by one can shield many. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe stands here not just as a regulator and observer, but as an active combatant in this fight. We are committed unequivocally to marshal the resources, forge the partnerships, and enforce measures needed to protect the nation's financial stability from cyber threats. This is now a top priority in our mandate of ensuring safe and sound financial systems. We pledge to lead by example, strengthening our own systems, being transparent about threats, and fostering an environment of trust and cooperation. But we cannot do it alone. I call the leadership of banks, make cybersecurity a bottom agenda, fund your security teams, and participate wholeheartedly in information sharing alliances. I call on our law enforcement leaders, prioritize cybercrime, treat online fraud cases with seriousness they deserve, and work closely with financial institutions. You have willing allies in us, and together we can turn the tide on the fraudsters. I call my fellow regulators and government officials, let us update our laws, close regulatory gaps, and support each other in capacity building. The time of turf wars or inertia is long past. We need joint action. Critically, I call on the public, ordinary citizens and customers, remain vigilant, educate yourselves and those around you about safe online practices. Your skepticism can be a powerful shield against deception. When in doubt, verify with your bank. Report suspicious activities. You are not powerless. Each individual act of caution is a brick in the wall that keeps your community safe. Honorable Minister, distinguished delegates of our organizers, Monipac, I hope that this keynote doesn't mark another discussion, but a turning point. The moment we solidified our united front against cybercrime, history will look back at this period as one that tested the resilience of the legal systems worldwide. I am confident that if we take the right actions, anchored in collaboration, Zimbabwe's story will be one of a nation that confronted cyber threat head-on and emerged stronger and more secure. Together, banks, regulators, law enforcement, with the support of our citizens, can and will thwart cyber fraudsters. Let us move forward with resolve, unity, and vigilance. The stakes are high, but our determination is higher. The Reserve of Zimbabwe is committed to this fight for the long haul, and I trust that commitment is shared by all you present. Thank you all, bankers, officers, officials, citizens, government agencies, for joining hands in this crucial endeavor. Let us act now and act together to secure our cyber future and protect the prosperity and stability of Zimbabwe. I wish you all a candid, fruitful conversations that will result in implementing roadmaps. I hope to attend future summits to give progress updates on the actions we'll be taking, as well as statistical outcomes that will demonstrate a positive result of our combined efforts to stem cyber fraud. I thank you.